Hello, my dear friends and dreamers. If you enjoy this story, please do subscribe. Welcome back to another evening of shared tales and wonder. Tonight, we journey far across the world to ancient India, a land of sacred rivers and towering mountains, of gods who walk among mortals and magic that hums in every temple bell. This is a story of celestial dancers called Apsaras, beings of such beauty that even the stars grow dim in their presence. It's also a story of a young musician whose gift was so pure that it reached the very halls of heaven itself. Now, I have always been fascinated by Indian mythology. There is something deeply comforting about its tales, the way they blend the divine with the everyday, the way they remind us that wonder exists just beyond the veil of the ordinary world. So, if you enjoy what I do here and want a way to support these stories, then consider subscribing and sharing with fellow dreamers. But for now, settle into your most comfortable spot, perhaps with a warm cup of chai if you have it, and let us begin. In the verdant heartland of ancient India, where the great river Yamuna wound through the landscape like a silver ribbon dropped by some careless goddess, there stood a village called Padmapura. The name meant Lotus Town, and it had earned this title honestly, for the river here widened into a great pool where lotuses bloomed in such abundance that during certain months the entire surface of the water disappeared beneath pink and white petals. The villagers said that the goddess Lakshmi herself had blessed this spot, and perhaps they were right, for Padmapura knew neither famine nor plague, and its people lived in contentment that bordered on the miraculous. The village woke each morning to the same gentle symphony. First came the temple bells, rung by old Pandit Sharma, who had been performing this duty for 50 years and showed no signs of stopping. The bells had a particular quality to them, a resonance that seemed to linger in the air long after the ringing ceased, as if the sound itself was reluctant to fade away. Then came the roosters, a competitive lot who seemed to believe that whoever crowed loudest would win some unspecified prize. After that, the village dogs would add their voices, and the cattle in their sheds would low their morning greetings, and slowly, gradually, the human sounds would join in. Mothers calling children to wake, merchants opening their shop fronts with the clatter of wooden shutters, the rhythmic slap of clothes being beaten clean at the river's edge. On this particular morning, a young man named Devraj stirred in his small but tidy home near the eastern edge of the village. He was perhaps 24 summers old, though he had never bothered to count precisely. He had the kind of face that invited trust, with warm brown eyes and features that seemed perpetually poised on the edge of a gentle smile. His hair was dark and somewhat unruly, forever falling across his forehead despite his grandmother's attempts to tame it with coconut oil. His hands, though, were his most remarkable feature, long-fingered and graceful. They seemed almost to have a life of their own, always moving, always seeking something to do. Devraj rose from his simple cotton mattress and stretched until his shoulders gave a satisfying pop. His room was modest in the extreme. A sleeping mat, a wooden chest containing his few clothes, a small altar in the corner where a brass lamp burned eternally before an image of Saraswati, goddess of music music and learning. And dominating the space, resting on a carved wooden stand, was his veena. The veena was the great stringed instrument of Indian classical music, and Devraj was a thing of beauty that belied his simple circumstances. It had been his father's and his grandfather's before that, passed down through 4 generations of musicians. The body was carved from jackwood, polished to a warm honey glow by countless hours of handling. The resonating gourds at each end were decorated with delicate paintings of peacocks and flowering vines. The frets were made of brass, worn smooth by years of fingers pressing upon them. When sunlight caught the strings, they gleamed like threads of gold. Devraj touched the instrument gently, as one might touch a sleeping child, and felt the familiar thrum of possibility that lived within its wooden frame. "Good morning, old friend," he murmured. The veena did not answer, but that was all right. Devraj had long ago learned that some conversations happened beyond words. He performed his morning ablutions at the clay pot of water in the corner, splashing the cool liquid on his face and running wet fingers through his impossible hair. Then he changed into a fresh dhoti, the simple wrapped garment that most men in the village wore, and a loose cotton kurta dyed the pale orange of a morning sky. He was just fastening his sandals when a voice called from outside his door, "Devraj Beta, are you awake? Your tea is growing cold and my patience is growing thin." That was Amma, his grandmother, and despite her words, there was nothing thin about her patience. She had raised him since he was 7 years old, when the great fever had taken both his parents within a single terrible week. She had been ancient even then, or so it had seemed to a grieving child, but somehow she had found the strength to remake herself into everything he needed: mother, father, teacher, friend. Now she was genuinely old, her hair white as temple jasmine, her back bent from years of labor, but her eyes remained sharp and her tongue sharper still. Devraj emerged into the small courtyard that separated his sleeping quarters from the main house. Amma sat on a low wooden stool, a clay cup of tea cradled in her weathered hands. A second cup waited on a brass tray beside her, steam still rising from its surface. The courtyard was Amma's domain, and she had made it beautiful despite their modest means. Tulsi plants grew in clay pots along the walls. A mango tree provided shade in one corner. Marigolds and jasmine added their colors and scents to every available space. "I was awake before the bells," Devraj said, settling onto the ground beside her and reaching for his tea. "I was just greeting my veena." Amma snorted softly. "You greet that instrument more tenderly than you greet your own grandmother. Perhaps I should grow strings and learn to make music. If you did, you would be the most beloved veena in all the land," Devraj replied with a grin. "Flatterer," she slapped his arm gently, "but I will accept the compliment. Now drink your tea before it goes cold. You have students coming today, do you not?" "Just 3. Little Mira, who shows real promise if she can learn to sit still for more than 5 minutes. Young Gopal, who has more enthusiasm than talent, but who makes up for it with determination. And old Krishnamurti, who insists he will master the basics before he dies, even if it kills him. That stubborn goat will outlive us all," Amma observed. I saw him yesterday carrying a sack of rice that would have challenged a man half his age. His back may be bent, but his spirit is straight as a temple pillar. They sat in companionable silence for a while, sipping their tea as the village came fully awake around them. The tea was perfect, as Amma's tea always was, flavored with cardamom and ginger and sweetened with jaggery. The morning air was cool, but held the promise of later warmth, carrying with it the scent of someone's breakfast cooking, the fragrance of flowers, the distant earthy smell of the river. "You were out late again last night," Amma said eventually. Her tone was casual, but Devraj knew her well enough to hear the concern beneath it. "I could not sleep. The moonlight was too beautiful to waste on closed eyes. I walked to the river and played for a while. You play every night now. At the river, in the forest, at odd hours when decent people are dreaming." Her eyes studied his face. "What is it you seek, Beta?" The question caught him off guard, as Amma's questions often did. She had a way of seeing straight through to the heart of things, bypassing all the comfortable deflections that most people were willing to accept. "I do not know," he admitted. "There is a restlessness in me lately. A feeling that something is waiting just beyond my reach. When I play, especially at night, especially near the water, I feel as though the music is reaching towards something or someone." Amma was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "There are stories, you know, old stories about the river at night. About lights that dance above the water when the moon is full. About music that answers music if the player is worthy." Devraj felt a shiver run through him that had nothing to do with the morning cool. "I have seen the lights," he confessed, 3 times now. At first I thought they were fireflies, but fireflies do not move like that. They do not dance. And have you told anyone else of this? Who would believe me? They would think the musician had finally played himself mad. Amma set down her teacup with careful precision. "Listen to me, Devraj. My mother used to tell me tales of beings called Apsaras, celestial nymphs who dance in the court of Lord Indra, king of the gods. They are beings of impossible beauty, blessed with arts that mortals can only dream of. Sometimes, very rarely, they visit the mortal world. They are drawn by purity of heart, by devotion to art, by music that rises above the ordinary and touches the divine." Devraj stared at her. "Amma, surely you do not believe that I have attracted the attention of a celestial being. I am just a village musician who teaches children to pluck strings. You are a musician whose playing makes grown men weep," she countered. "You are a soul who has never desired wealth or fame, only the perfection of your craft. You are pure of heart in a world that rewards cunning. If the divine were seeking someone worthy of attention, they could do far worse than you." She reached out and took his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "But hear me well, Beta. The divine is not meant to mingle with the mortal. Such meetings bring wonder, yes, but they also bring sorrow. The old stories are full of men and women who loved what they could not keep, who reached for stars and found only the cold distance of the sky. Promise me you will be careful. Promise me you will not lose yourself in chasing lights that may lead you away from everything solid and real." "I promise," Devraj said. though even as the words left his mouth he felt their weight settle uncertainly on his shoulders. He meant them, truly he did, but there was that restlessness again, that reaching, that sense of something just beyond the veil of the ordinary world. The morning continued its gentle progress. Devraj helped Amma with her chores, sweeping the courtyard, feeding the small goat they kept for milk, drawing water from the well. Then he took his veena and walked to the river, as was his custom, to practice before his students arrived. The path to the river wound through the edges of the village, past the potter's wheel where old Kumha was already shaping clay with his ancient hands, past the house of the spice merchant where the air hung heavy with the fragrance of turmeric and cumin, past the temple where Pandit Sharma was now conducting the morning prayers, his voice rising and falling in the eternal rhythms of Sanskrit. Villagers greeted Devraj as he passed, and he returned their greetings with the easy familiarity of someone who had known these people all his life. "There goes our musician," called one of the cloth merchants, looking up from the fabric he was arranging in his shop front. "Play something beautiful today, Devraj. My heart needs lifting." "When has he ever played anything but beautiful?" her neighbor replied. "That boy has music in his blood." Devraj smiled and continued on, the familiar weight of the veena comfortable against his shoulder. He supposed they were right, in a way. He did have music in his blood. His father had been a musician, as had his grandfather and great-grandfather before him. The veena had passed from hand to hand, each generation adding to its legacy. Devraj sometimes felt, when his fingers found the strings, that all those ancestors played through him, their knowledge and skill flowing through the wood and wire and into his very soul. The river awaited him, as it always did, vast and patient and eternal. At this hour the lotus pool was at its most beautiful. The morning light caught the water at just the right angle, turning it to liquid gold beneath the floating flowers. Mist still clung to the surface in patches, giving the scene an ethereal quality. Birds sang in the trees along the bank. A family of ducks paddled serenely among the lotus pads. Devraj found his usual spot, a large flat rock that jutted out over the water, and settled himself cross-legged, with the veena across his lap. He closed his eyes, took several deep breaths, and let the peace of the place seep into him. Then he began to play. The music started simply, as it always did. Basic scales and patterns that warmed his fingers and focused his mind. But gradually, it evolved, becoming something more. Notes wove together into phrases, phrases into melodies, melodies into something that seemed to reach beyond sound itself. The river seemed to pause in its eternal flow to listen. The birds fell silent. Even the mist swirled differently, as if dancing to the rhythm of his playing. Devraj lost himself in the music. Time ceased to have meaning. There was only the song and the instrument, and the strange reaching feeling that had grown so strong in recent weeks. His fingers moved of their own accord, finding patterns he did not consciously know, playing ragas he had never learned. The music rose toward the sky like incense smoke, like prayer, like longing given voice. And perhaps it was his imagination. Perhaps it was a trick of the morning light. But for just a moment, just a heartbeat, he thought he saw something above the water. A shimmer, a dance, a figure made of light and impossible grace. Then the vision was gone, if it had ever been there at all, and a child's voice called from the bank. "Master Devraj, I am here for my lesson." Little Mira stood on the path, her small veena clutched in her arms, her face bright with eagerness. The ordinary world had returned, solid and real and demanding attention. Devraj drew a deep breath and smiled at his student. "Come then," he called. "Let us see how much you have practiced." But as he turned to teach, some part of him remained by the water, reaching toward a shimmer that might have been nothing more than a dream. And somewhere, in a realm beyond mortal sight, something that was definitely not a dream stirred and smiled and waited. The day passed in its usual rhythms, but to Devraj everything felt different. The colors seemed brighter, the sounds seemed clearer, and when night finally fell and the full moon rose above the lotus pool, he knew with absolute certainty that his life was about to change forever. He just did not know how much. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of mango and rose, the village gathered in the central square for the weekly storytelling. This was an old tradition in Padmapura, older than anyone could remember, a time when work was set aside and the whole community came together to share tales and wisdom. Children sat cross-legged in the front, their eyes wide with anticipation. Parents settled on woven mats behind them, grateful for a moment of rest. The elderly claimed the wooden benches that ringed the square, their joints creaking only slightly less than the ancient wood beneath them. At the center of it all, on a raised platform decorated with marigold garlands and oil lamps, sat Guru Vishwamitra. The old teacher was something of a legend himself. He had traveled the length and breadth of India in his youth, studying with masters in distant cities, collecting stories the way some men collected coins or gemstones. His beard was white as moonlight and fell nearly to his waist. His eyes, though clouded slightly with age, still sparkled with the fire of a born storyteller. When he spoke, his voice carried effortlessly across the square, now dropping to a whisper that somehow everyone could hear, now rising to thunder that made children grab their mothers' hands. Tonight, he had announced, he would speak of the Apsaras. Devraj sat near the back of the gathering, his veena resting against his shoulder. Even here, he had heard tales of the Apsaras before, of course. Every child in India grew up with stories of the celestial dancers. But tonight, after what he had glimpsed that morning, the stories felt different. They felt urgent, personal, like messages meant specifically for him. Guru Vishwamitra raised his hands, and the murmur of conversation faded to silence. "In the beginning," he intoned, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality of ancient verse, "when the gods churned the great ocean of milk to obtain the nectar of immortality, many wonders emerged from those cosmic waters. The wish-fulfilling cow, the divine physician, poison that threatened to destroy all creation. And among these wonders came the Apsaras, celestial nymphs of such beauty that even the gods themselves were struck speechless." He paused, letting the image settle in the minds of his listeners. They emerge from the foam of the ocean, these divine beings, clothed in garments of woven starlight, adorned with jewels that contain captured moonbeams. Their faces held the beauty of every flower that has ever bloomed. Their eyes sparkled with the depth of every ocean. Their movements were grace itself made visible, poetry written in flesh and light. Little Mira, sitting near the front, raised her hand. Guruji, what do they do? The Apsaras? Are they like the gods? Guru Vishwamitra smiled at her with grandfatherly warmth. An excellent question, child. The Apsaras are not gods themselves, but they serve the gods in many ways. They are the dancers and musicians of heaven, performing in the court of Lord Indra, king of the celestial realm. When the gods feast, the Apsaras provide entertainment beyond mortal imagination. Their dances tell stories of creation and destruction, of love and loss, of all the great truths of existence. Their music makes the very stars weep with joy. He leaned forward, his voice dropping conspiratorially. But they have other duties as well. Sometimes, when a sage or a king becomes too powerful through meditation or righteous deeds, the gods grow nervous. A mortal who accumulates too much spiritual power might challenge heaven itself. And so the Apsaras are sent to earth to distract these mighty souls with beauty, to pull them back from the heights they have climbed. Is that not cruel? Someone called from the crowd. To use beauty as a weapon? Perhaps, Guru Vishwamitra acknowledged. The ways of the gods are not always kind by mortal reckoning. But consider this. The Apsaras do not destroy. They do not kill or conquer. They remind powerful men that they are still human, that the pleasures of the flesh and heart are not beneath them. Is it truly cruel to teach someone that they are not a god? He straightened again, his voice rising. Let me tell you of the most famous of all such tales. The story of King Pururavas and the Apsara Urvashi. The crowd settled deeper into their seats. This was a story everyone knew, but a story worth hearing again, especially when told by a master like Vishwamitra. Urvashi was the most beautiful of all the Apsaras, Vishwamitra began. Her name meant she who encompasses the heart, and she lived up to that name entirely. Kings and sages, gods and demons all fell helpless before her beauty. Her dance was said to contain the movement of rivers and the turning of seasons. Her smile could make flowers bloom out of their proper time. One day, Urvashi made a mistake during a performance in Indra's court. Her mind wandered, perhaps, or her foot fell in the wrong place. The details are lost to time. What matters is that Indra, in his anger, cursed her to live upon the earth until she could find true love with a mortal man. Guru Vishwamitra paused to take a sip of water from a clay cup at his feet. Urvashi wandered the earth in despair, for how could a celestial being find love among mere mortals? How could one who had seen the glories of heaven be satisfied with the dull pleasures of the world below? But then she encountered King Pururavas. Pururavas was the founder of the lunar dynasty, a king of extraordinary beauty and virtue. He was handsome beyond the measure of ordinary men, with a voice like honey and a heart as pure as mountain snow. When Urvashi first saw him, something stirred within her that she had never felt before, and when Pururavas saw her, he fell instantly, completely, irrevocably in love. A sigh rippled through the crowd. Even the most cynical among them were not immune to the romance of the tale. They lived together as husband and wife, the king and the Apsara, and for a time they were happy beyond measure. But Urvashi had set conditions for their union. She had said that she would stay only as long as Pururavas never appeared before her unclothed, and that he must never fail to protect the 2 lambs she kept as pets. Now, the other gods looked upon this union with jealousy and spite. They could not bear to see Urvashi happy with a mortal when she had refused so many of them. So they devised a plan. One night, they sent servants to steal her lambs. Pururavas heard the bleating and leapt from bed to pursue the thieves. At that moment, the god sent a flash of lightning that illuminated the room, revealing his naked form to Urvashi. The conditions were broken. Urvashi had no choice. She vanished, returning to the celestial realm, leaving Pururavas alone and broken-hearted. Guru Vishwamitra's voice grew soft, almost tender. The king wandered the earth for years, mad with grief, searching for his lost love. He called her name into the wind, into the rivers, into the empty sky. And finally, at last, Urvashi heard his cries and was moved by his devotion. She appeared to him one final time. She could not stay, she told him. The curse was broken, and she must return to heaven. But she gave him a gift, a son, already growing in her womb, whom she would send to him when the child was old enough. And she told him something else, something that has echoed through all the ages since. She said, "Our love was real, though I am divine, and you are mortal. What we had cannot be taken from us, not by gods or time or death. In some realm beyond the heavens themselves, we are still together and will be always." Silence hung over the square. Little Mira was crying quietly. Even some of the men wiped at their eyes, pretending it was the smoke from the oil lamps. Devraj felt the story settle into his bones like music, like prophecy, like warning. Guru Vishwamitra concluded his tale with the traditional ending. Pururavas eventually died, as all mortals must, but it is said that the gods, moved by his devotion, allowed him to become an immortal being after death, so that he could be with Urvashi forever in the celestial realm. Their love, born of curse and chance, became eternal. The old teacher looked out over his audience, and for a moment his eyes seemed to find Devraj in the back of the crowd. Remember this, children, remember it well. The boundary between the divine and the mortal is real, but it is not absolute. Love can cross it, though not without cost. Beauty can breach it, though not without sorrow. And music, he added, his gaze still resting on Devraj. Music is perhaps the greatest bridge of all, for music speaks the language of the soul, and souls know no boundaries. The gathering began to break up, people rising and stretching, children being herded toward home, neighbors exchanging thoughts on the evening's entertainment. But Devraj remained seated, lost in thought. The veena still clutched against his chest like a talisman. "You look as though you have seen a ghost," Amma said, appearing beside him with her shawl pulled tight against the evening chill. "Or perhaps heard one in the Guru's tale." "Perhaps I have," Devraj murmured. "Amma, do you think it is possible that a mortal could truly love a celestial being? That such love could be real, and not just enchantment?" Amma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but serious. I think love is the most real thing in all creation, Beta. More real than stone or steel, more real than kings or kingdoms. Whether it blooms between two mortals or between a mortal and a god, love is love. But I also think that the stories remind us of the cost. Pururavas gained eternity, yes, but first he lost everything. He wandered mad for years. He suffered beyond imagining. The gods did not give him his happy ending freely. He paid for it in tears. She took his arm and began leading him home. I do not want to see you suffer, Devraj. I do not want to watch you wander mad, searching for something that can never be yours. Whatever is calling to you from the river, from the moonlight, be careful. Be very careful. Devraj nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere, already thinking of the night to come, already planning his path through the dark forest to the old temple that stood abandoned at its heart. Because the lights had not been random, he now realized. They had been coming from a specific direction. They had been leading him somewhere. And if the old stories were true, if such things were possible, then he had to know. He had to see. He had to follow the music that called to his music, even if it led him across the very boundary between worlds. The moon rose full and silver, and Devraj made his choice. Devraj waited until the village had fallen asleep. He waited until the last lamp was extinguished, until the last dog had settled into silence, until even the persistent frogs at the river's edge had slowed their chorus to a drowsy murmur. Then, with his veena slung across his back and his heart beating hard against his ribs, he slipped out of his home and into the silver-washed night. The full moon hung enormous above the trees, so bright that Devraj cast a shadow as sharp as at midday. The air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the distant earthiness of the river. Every sound seemed magnified in the stillness. The soft pad of his sandals on the path, the whisper of his cotton clothes against his skin, the quiet breathing of the sleeping village. He took the path that led away from the river, away from the familiar roads to the market and the temple and the homes of his neighbors. This path wound upward into the forested hills that cradled Padmapura, climbing through groves of mango and teak and ancient banyan trees, whose aerial roots hung like curtains of wooden rain. The villagers avoided these woods, especially at night. There were stories of spirits here, of the ghosts of long-dead priests, of supernatural beings who resented the intrusion of ordinary mortals. Devraj had always dismissed such tales as the inventions of parents seeking to keep children close to home. Now, walking alone through the moonlit forest, he was not so certain. The shadows seemed deeper than they should be. The silence seemed more profound. Once he could have sworn he heard footsteps behind him, but when he turned there was nothing but the pale trunks of trees and the darker spaces between them. A night bird called somewhere in the canopy, its voice strange and lonely, and Devraj found himself walking faster. The path grew narrower as he climbed, less a path and more a suggestion, an echo of a route that humans had once walked but no longer remembered. Roots clutched at his feet, low branches forced him to duck and weave. The moonlight, so bright in the open, barely penetrated here, reduced to scattered coins of silver on the forest floor. But Devraj pressed on, guided by something he could not name. Call it instinct, call it intuition, call it the same force that moved his fingers on the veena strings, finding notes he did not consciously know. Something was drawing him forward, and he trusted it with a faith that surprised him. After what might have been an hour, or might have been much longer, the forest opened suddenly into a clearing, and Devraj stopped dead, his breath catching in his throat. The temple was beautiful. It should not have been. It was ancient. That much was clear. Abandoned for so long that trees had grown through its courtyard, and vines had claimed its walls. The roof had partially collapsed, and the carved pillars leaned at precarious angles. Time and weather had worn away much of the decorative stonework, leaving only hints of what had once been elaborate ornamentation. And yet, despite all this, despite the ruin and the neglect, the temple was beautiful in a way that made Devraj's heart ache. Perhaps it was the moonlight, which seemed to gather here with unusual intensity, bathing everything in silver luminescence. Perhaps it was the way the vines and flowers had embraced the structure, not destroying it but transforming it into something half-built, half-grown. Perhaps it was the carvings that remained, images of dancers caught in eternal motion, their stone faces still holding expressions of transcendent joy. Devraj walked forward as if in a dream, his sandals making no sound on the ancient stones. The temple was dedicated to Saraswati, he realized as he studied the carvings, the goddess of music and learning, patroness of artists and scholars, his goddess, the one whose image burned eternally on the altar in his room. She had led him here. He was certain of it now. The main shrine was largely intact, sheltered by the portion of roof that still stood. Within it, barely visible in the moonlight, was a statue of the goddess herself, seated on her lotus throne with her veena across her lap. Her face was serene, knowing, the slight smile of one who understands secrets beyond mortal comprehension. Her stone fingers rested on the strings of her instrument as if about to play. Devraj knelt before the shrine and pressed his forehead to the cool stone floor in the traditional gesture of reverence. "Mother Saraswati," he whispered, "I do not know why you have brought me here. I do not know what you wish to show me. But I am yours, as I have always been yours. Guide my hands and my heart. Let my music be worthy of your blessing." He remained there for a long moment, feeling the ancient power of the place seeping into him. Then he rose, unslung his veena, and walked to the center of the temple courtyard. Here, remarkably, a pool of water remained. It was perfectly circular, perhaps the span of 10 men lying head to toe, and its surface was so still that it reflected the sky above like a mirror. Around its edges grew lotus flowers, white and pink, their petals closed in sleep, but their leaves spread wide upon the water. The pool was fed by a small spring that emerged from between 2 stones at its far edge, the water trickling with a soft musical sound. Devraj settled himself beside the pool, arranging his veena in his lap. The stone beneath him was smooth, worn by generations of worshippers who had perhaps sat in this very spot, making music for the goddess. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The music came differently here. In the village, by the lotus pool of the river, his playing was beautiful but bounded, shaped by the expectations of his audience, the familiar patterns of the ragas he had learned. Here, alone in this sacred space with no one to hear but the goddess and the night, the music freed itself. His fingers found notes he had never played, combinations that created sounds he had never imagined. The veena seemed to come alive in his hands, no longer an instrument but a partner, adding its own voice to the melody he was creating. The music rose and fell like breathing, like the pulse of the earth itself, like something ancient and wild and completely beyond human control. Devraj did not know how long he played. Time lost meaning in that moonlit courtyard, with the silent goddess watching from her shrine, and the still pool reflecting the stars. He was aware of nothing but the music, nothing but the reaching, nothing but the profound sense that he was not merely playing but communicating, sending a message into the vastness of the universe. And then, slowly, something began to change. The air grew warmer, though there was no fire nearby. The scent of flowers intensified until it was almost overwhelming. Jasmine and roses and strange blossoms he could not name. The moonlight seemed to brighten, gathering in the center of the clearing, condensing into something almost solid. Devraj's fingers faltered on the strings. His eyes opened wide. The water of the pool was glowing, not reflecting light, but generating it, a soft golden radiance that rose from beneath the surface and spread across the water, like dawn spreading across the sky. The lotus flowers were opening, their petals unfurling one by one despite the darkness, as if his music had convinced them it was morning. And above the pool, in the air itself, something was forming. It began as movement, a shimmer, a disturbance in the otherwise still air. Then it became light, swirling in patterns that suggested form without quite achieving it. Then, as Devraj watched with his heart pounding and his breath stopped in his chest, it became something more. A figure. A woman. No, not a woman. Something far beyond any woman he had ever seen or imagined. She stood above the water, not quite touching it, her feet hovering perhaps a hand's width above the glowing surface. Her form was human in shape but not in essence. She seemed to be made of moonlight and music, of the radiance of stars and the fragrance of celestial gardens. Her skin was the color of pearls, or perhaps of the inside of shells, shifting subtly with every movement. Her hair was long and dark, and moved as if in a breeze that Devraj could not feel, lifting and swirling around her like a living shadow. Her features were exquisitely, impossibly beautiful, but it was not a cold or remote beauty. There was a warmth in it, life, a dancing light that suggested laughter held barely in check. She wore a sari of fabric that did not exist in the mortal world, something that seemed woven from twilight and decorated with embroidery that might have been constellations. Her arms were adorned with bangles that chimed softly, though she had not moved, and at her throat hung a pendant that contained what looked like a captured star. Her eyes, when they met his, were the color of honey mixed with sunlight, golden and warm and deep beyond fathoming. Devraj forgot to breathe. His hands fell away from the veena strings. His voice abandoned him entirely. The celestial woman smiled, and the flowers around the pool bloomed more fully, as if her joy had given them permission. "So," she said, and her voice was music itself, was the sound of temple bells and flowing water and wind through ancient trees. "You are the one whose playing has been troubling my nights. You are the mortal who makes music that reaches heaven." Devraj tried to speak, failed, tried again. "I did not mean to trouble you," he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. "I only meant to play. I only meant to practice my art." She laughed, and the sound was silver and gold, was sunrise and rainfall, was everything beautiful compressed into a single expression of mirth. "Trouble me?" she repeated. "Oh no, musician, you have not troubled me. You have enchanted me. You have drawn me across the boundary between worlds. You have done what no mortal has done in 1,000 years." She moved then, gliding forward until she stood at the edge of the pool, almost close enough to touch. Her impassible eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously terrified and treasured. "I am Chitralekha," she said. "I am a painter of souls in the court of Lord Indra. It is my task to capture the essence of worthy beings, to preserve their images for eternity. I have painted kings and sages, heroes and saints, but I have never encountered a soul quite like yours." She extended her hand, and in her palm materialized a small glowing image. Devraj saw himself, but not as he appeared in any mirror. He saw his own soul somehow, his devotion and his longing and his pure love of music, captured in lines of light. "I have been watching you," Chitralekha continued, "for 3 months now. I have descended each night to listen to your playing. I have followed you to the river, to the forest, to the places where you make your music. I have seen the way you give yourself entirely to your art, holding nothing back. And tonight," she gestured to the temple around them, "tonight, you finally found your way here, to this sacred place. Tonight you played with such purity that I could hide no longer." She withdrew her hand, and the glowing image vanished. "You have called me musician. Intentionally or not, your music has crossed the boundary between worlds and found me, and I have come." Devraj finally found his voice, though it still trembled like a reed in wind. "I dreamed of you," he said. "Even before I saw you, even before the lights above the water, I think I dreamed of you. There's been something missing in my music, something I was reaching for without knowing what it was. Was it you? Were you what I was seeking?" Chitralekha's smile softened, became something almost sad. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps you were seeking something greater, something beyond any single being. The divine is not a destination, musician. It is a direction. You have been moving toward it all your life. I am simply," she hesitated, searching for words that might translate from celestial to mortal understanding. "I am simply someone you have met along the way." They stood in silence for a moment, the Apsara and the musician regarding each other across the impossible gulf between their natures. The moon had moved noticeably in the sky. Dawn could not be far away. "I must go," Chitralekha said finally. "The night is nearly spent, and I cannot remain in the mortal world when the sun rises. But I wanted you to know, musician, I wanted you to understand that your playing is worthy, that it reaches heaven, that it has touched at least one celestial heart. She began to fade, her form becoming less solid, the moonlight starting to shine through her rather than upon her. Wait, Devraj called, scrambling to his feet. Will I see you again? Can I see you again? Chitraleka paused in her dissolution, her golden eyes meeting his one final time. The next full moon, she said. Come here, to this temple, and play as you played tonight. If the music is true, if the calling is sincere, I will answer. Then she was gone, dissolved into moonlight and memory, leaving only the faint fragrance of celestial flowers and a lingering warmth in the air. Devraj stood alone in the ancient temple, his veena clutched to his chest, watching the first pale hints of dawn appear beyond the trees. His hands were shaking, his heart was pounding. His entire understanding of the world had been overturned in a single night. But beneath the shock and the wonder and the fear, something else was growing. Hope, joy, and already, the first stirrings of something that might one day be called love. The month that followed was the longest of Devraj's life. He continued his daily routines, of course. He rose with the temple bells, drank tea with Amma, practiced by the river, taught his students. He ate and slept and walked and talked and did all the ordinary things that ordinary people do. But beneath the surface of this normal existence, everything had changed. He could not stop thinking about her. Chitraleka. Even her name was music, the syllables rolling through his mind like notes of a melody he could not forget. He whispered it to himself as he fell asleep. He murmured it as he practiced his scales. He found himself writing it in the dust with his finger, then quickly erasing it, embarrassed by his own foolishness. Had it even been real? In the bright light of ordinary days, surrounded by the mundane business of village life, it was easy to wonder. Perhaps he had fallen asleep in the forest. Perhaps it had been a dream, a fantasy conjured by a lonely heart and an overactive imagination. He had heard stories of people who saw visions after wandering too long in sacred places, their minds open to things that were not quite real. But then he would remember her eyes. He would remember her voice. He would remember the warmth in the air when she appeared, the fragrance of flowers that did not grow in any earthly garden. And he would know, with a certainty that defied reason, that it had been true. The days crawled past. The waning moon shrank to a sliver, then disappeared entirely, then began to grow again. Devraj counted each phase obsessively, mentally calculating how many days remained until the next full moon, until he could return to the temple, until he might see her again. His music changed during those weeks. It became deeper, more complex, filled with longing that his listeners could hear even if they could not name it. The villagers noticed. "You play like a man in love," old Krishnamurti observed during one of their lessons. His ancient fingers had been attempting a simple exercise, but they paused now as he studied his young teacher. "Who is she? Someone in the village? The potter's daughter has been making eyes at you since spring." "There is no one," Devraj said, perhaps too quickly. "I am merely exploring new emotions in my music." Krishnamurti snorted. "I am old, boy, not blind. I have loved 4 women in my long life, married 2 of them, buried both. I know the sound of love when I hear it. Whoever she is, I hope she is worthy of such music." Amma was more direct. "You have been to the forest again?" she said one evening. "Not a question. You went the night of the full moon, and you have not been the same since. I know I cannot stop you, Devraj. You are a grown man, and your choices are your own. But please," she took his hands in hers, her grip fierce despite her age, "please be careful. The divine is not a toy. It is not something to be pursued like a market treasure. Those who reach too far into heaven often find themselves falling a very long way." "I will be careful, Amma," Devraj promised. He meant it too, but he also knew that he would return to the temple when the moon was full. He could no more stop himself than he could stop his own heartbeat. The night finally came. Devraj set out earlier this time, leaving while the sunset still painted the western sky in shades of copper and rose. He wanted to be at the temple before moonrise, wanted to be settled and ready when the silver light began to fill the clearing. He carried not only his veena, but also a small bundle, offerings for the goddess Saraswati, whose temple this had been. Flowers picked from Amma's garden, a small pot of honey, a handful of rice. The forest seemed less menacing this time, perhaps because it was not yet fully dark, perhaps because he was no longer traveling into the unknown. He knew this path now. He knew where the roots waited to trip unwary feet, where the branches hung low, where the path split and which fork led to the temple. The journey passed quickly, and he emerged into the clearing just as the last light of day faded from the sky. The temple was exactly as he remembered it, ancient and ruined and impossibly beautiful. The pool lay still and dark, waiting for the moon to find it. The statue of Saraswati smiled her knowing smile from within her shrine. The carvings of dancers seemed to move in the gathering dusk, their stone bodies swaying to music only they could hear. Devraj placed his offerings at the foot of the goddess's statue, bowing low and murmuring prayers of gratitude and petition. Then he took his place beside the pool, arranged his veena, and waited. The moon rose slowly, majestically, climbing above the trees like a queen ascending her throne. Its light spilled into the clearing degree by degree, first touching the treetops, then the collapsed roof of the temple, then the pool itself. The water began to glow, softly at first, then more brightly, responding to the moonlight with a radiance that seemed to come from within. Devraj began to play. He had practiced this music for an entire month, refining it, perfecting it, pouring all his longing and hope into every note. It was not like any raga he had learned from his teachers or inherited from his father. It was something new, something that had grown from his encounter with the divine, a melody that seemed to reach simultaneously inward and outward into the depths of his own soul and out toward the heavens. The music rose into the night air, weaving between the stars, calling across the boundary between worlds, and she came. This time, Devraj did not falter when she appeared. He kept playing as the air above the pool began to shimmer, as the light gathered and condensed, as the impossible form of the Apsara materialized from nothing. He played through his pounding heart and trembling hands, letting the music speak what words could not express. "You came," Chitraleka said, when she had fully formed, her voice filled with something that might have been wonder. "I was not certain you would, Many mortals, when they encounter the divine, choose to convince themselves it was a dream. It is easier, perhaps, safer. I could never convince myself that you were a dream, Devraj replied, his fingers still moving on the strings. You are more real than anything I have ever known. She smiled, and the flowers around the pool opened their petals in response. Your music has grown, she observed. It has deepened. What has happened in this past month? I have been thinking of you, Devraj admitted. Every moment of every day, your face, your voice, the way you moved, the way you made me feel, I have tried to capture it in music, to express what words cannot say. Chitralekha descended to the edge of the pool, her feet still hovering just above the water's surface. In the moonlight, she seemed somehow more solid than before, more present, as if his music had anchored her more firmly to the mortal world. I must confess something to you, she said. I too have been thinking of you, of your music, of what it might mean that a mortal soul has called to me across the boundary of worlds. I have spoken to no one of this. It is not, she hesitated, searching for words. It is not common for Apsaras to form attachments to mortals. It is not forbidden exactly, but it is complicated. Complicated how? She was silent for a long moment, her golden eyes studying him with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously exposed and embraced. Do you know what I do, Devraj? She asked finally. Do you know my role in the celestial court? You said you paint souls. Yes, but it is more than that. She made a graceful gesture, and the air before her began to shimmer. Images formed, ghostly and translucent, but clear enough to understand. I am one of the keepers of the karmic record. When a soul is ready to be reborn, when it has earned the right to ascend or must descend to learn new lessons, it comes before the council of the gods, and I paint its portrait. The images showed her as she must appear in heaven, standing before a canvas of light with a brush made of what looked like crystallized starlight. Before her floated a glowing orb, and as Devraj watched, she painted it, capturing its essence on the luminous canvas. These portraits guide the process of rebirth, Chitralekha continued. They show the gods what a soul has been, what it has learned, what it still needs to understand. Without them, the cycle of reincarnation would become chaotic. Souls might be placed in lives that do not suit their development. The entire cosmic order depends on the accuracy of my work. The images faded, and she turned back to face him. I am not just a dancer in Indra's court, Devraj. I am one of the pillars upon which the universe rests. If I were to abandon my duty even for love, the consequences would ripple across all of creation. Devraj set down his veena, giving her his full attention. Why are you telling me this? He asked softly. Are you warning me? Telling me that whatever this is between us cannot continue? I am telling you the truth, she replied, because if there is to be anything between us, you deserve to know what I am, what I risk by being here with you, what we both risk. And what do we risk? Everything, she whispered, and nothing. The gods are not kind to those who break their rules, Devraj. But they are also not as all-seeing as mortals believe. What happens in hidden temples under the cover of moonlight, between a celestial being and a mortal with a pure heart, such things can remain secret for a time. She moved closer, close enough that Devraj could feel the warmth radiating from her form, could smell the impossible fragrance of her celestial essence. "I am not supposed to feel what I feel when I hear your music," she said. "I am not supposed to think of a mortal man when I should be thinking of my duties. I am not supposed to count the days until the full moon as eagerly as any village girl counting the days until her wedding. But I do all of these things." "Chitralekha," Devraj breathed. "Tell me to leave," she said, and her voice held something like pleading. "Tell me to return to heaven and never come back. Tell me that this is madness, that nothing good can come from a love between celestial and mortal. Be wise where I cannot be. Save us both from what we are feeling." Devraj stood slowly, leaving his veena on the ground. He stepped to the edge of the pool, so close now that he could have reached out and touched her, though he did not dare. "I cannot tell you that," he said. "I cannot lie to you, and it would be a lie. Whatever this is, whatever comes of it, I do not want it to end. I have spent my entire life reaching for something I could not name. My music has always been a searching, a calling out into the vastness of existence, hoping for an answer. And you," he swallowed hard, fighting the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him, "you are the answer. You are what I have been reaching for all along." Chitralekha made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, or perhaps both at once. "You foolish, beautiful, impossible mortal," she said. "Do you have any idea what you are saying?" "What you are asking for?" "I am asking for time," Devraj replied. "I am asking for you to return, again and again, as long as you are able. I am asking to know you, to learn who you are beyond your divine duties. I am asking for the chance to love you, even if that love can never be what mortal loves usually are." She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but steady. "The full moon comes once a month. I can be here each time, for a few hours between moonrise and dawn. It's not much time in the span of mortal or celestial existence. But it is what I can offer. It is enough." Devraj said, "It is more than enough." "Then let us begin," Chitralekha said, and she smiled a smile that lit the clearing brighter than the moon. "Let us learn who we are to each other. And whatever comes, whatever price the universe demands, let us pay it willingly." She extended her hand, and Devraj took it. Her touch was warm, warmer than human skin, but not burning. It felt like holding condensed sunlight, like grasping hope itself. A tremor ran through both of them at the contact, a recognition, a connection forged across the impossible distance between divine and mortal. The night stretched before them, silver and sacred and full of possibility. And as Devraj picked up his veena and began to play once more, Chitralekha began to dance. It was the first of many nights, the first of many songs, the first steps on a path that would lead them both further than either could imagine. But in that moment, in that moonlit temple, with music rising and celestial feet barely touching the glowing water, nothing else mattered. They had found each other, and for now, that was enough. The months that followed were unlike anything Devraj had ever experienced. Each full moon brought him to the temple, and each full moon brought Chitralekha down from the heavens to meet him. They developed rituals, traditions of their own making. He would arrive first, placing offerings at the goddess's shrine, and then settling beside the pool to play. She would materialize as his music reached its peak, stepping out of moonlight as easily as a woman stepping through a doorway. And then, for the precious hours between her arrival and the first hint of dawn, they would talk and laugh and share the stories of their separate worlds. Devraj learned things about heaven that no mortal had ever known. He learned that the celestial realm was not a single place, but a collection of realms, each one ruled by different gods and populated by different beings. Indra's court, where Chitralekha spent most of her time, was a place of eternal celebration where music never ceased and dances never tired. The gardens there bloomed with flowers that existed in no earthly soil, colors that had no names in any human language, fragrances that could drive a mortal mad with longing. "Tell me about the other Apsaras," Devraj asked one night, as they sat together by the glowing pool. He had stopped playing, and she had settled beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence, even though their bodies did not quite touch. "Are they all like you?" Chitralekha laughed, that silver bell sound that never failed to make his heart race. "We are all different," she said, "just as mortal women are all different. Urvashi is the most beautiful, or so it is said, though I have always found such rankings tedious. She is proud and passionate, quick to love and quick to anger. Menaka is gentle, almost motherly, though she was the one sent to distract the great sage Vishwamitra and break his meditation. Ramba is our leader, the chief Apsara, ancient beyond counting and wise in ways that sometimes frighten even us. Tilottama was crafted by the divine architect Vishwakarma from the most perfect parts of all creation, and she knows it, carries herself with an awareness of her own perfection that can be exhausting. "And you?" Devraj asked. "How would you describe yourself?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I am the watcher," she said finally, "the observer. While the others dance and sing and captivate, I watch and remember. It is why I became a painter of souls. I see things that others miss, the small gestures, the hidden fears, the secret hopes. I capture what lies beneath the surface." She turned to look at him, her golden eyes soft in the moonlight. "It is why I noticed you, I think. Your music drew me, yes, but what kept me returning was what I saw beneath it, the purity, the longing, the soul that had never stopped searching, even when it did not know what it sought." Devraj felt heat rise to his cheeks. In all his life, no one had ever seen him so clearly. "What else is there in heaven?" he asked, partly to change the subject, partly because his curiosity was genuine. "Besides the court and the gardens and the endless dancing?" "Oh, so much," Chitralekha said, warming to the topic. "There are the celestial musicians, the Gandharvas who make music that would shatter mortal ears with its beauty. There are the mountains where the gods go to meditate, peaks so high that they pierce the fabric of reality itself. There are the rivers of light that flow between the realms, carrying blessings and prayers and dreams. There are the libraries where every thought ever thought is recorded, every story ever told is preserved." Her voice took on a wistful quality. "There is the tree of wishes, which grants the desires of those pure enough to approach it. There is the cow of plenty, from whom all abundance flows. There is the elephant Airavata, who carries Indra into battle with his 4 tusks and his skin like clouds at sunset. It sounds magnificent, Devraj said. It is, she agreed. And it is also, she paused, searching for the right word, distant, removed. In heaven, there is no struggle, no striving. Everything is perfect, and perfection, I have discovered, can become its own kind of prison. She gestured to the world around them, the ruined temple, the dark forest, the ordinary night sky. Here, things are imperfect. Things change and decay and struggle to survive. And yet she smiled. There is something in that imperfection that heaven lacks. There is growth, there is surprise, there is the possibility of becoming something you were not before. In return for her tales of heaven, Devraj shared stories of earth. He told her about the simple pleasures that celestial beings might never know. The taste of food when you are truly hungry, the comfort of sleep after a hard day's work, the satisfaction of learning a difficult skill through practice and patience. He described the village for her, painting word pictures of the people who lived there. Old Pandit Sharma, who had rung the temple bells for 50 years and still believed each morning's ringing was as important as the first. Amma, who had rebuilt her life after losing her son and daughter-in-law, who had found new purpose in raising a grieving child. Little Mira, who had more talent in her small fingers than she yet knew, who might one day become a greater musician than Devraj himself. He told her about mortal joys and sorrows, about weddings and funerals, about the festival of lights and the festival of colors, about the way the entire village came together when someone was in need. And he taught her his music. This was perhaps the strangest part of their growing bond. Chitralekha, who had heard the Gandharvas play, who had danced to celestial melodies for eons, who knew music that would drive mortal listeners mad with its perfection, sat beside a village musician and learned his simple ragas as though they were precious treasures. "Teach me this one again," she would say, humming a melody he had played earlier. "What is it called?" "It has no name," he would reply. "It is just something I created, trying to capture the feeling of sunrise over the river." And she would practice it, her divine voice wrapping around his mortal melody, transforming it into something that belonged to both worlds. In exchange, she taught him celestial music, ragas that existed only in heaven, melodies that had been ancient when the world was young. She could not teach him everything, for some divine music would damage mortal minds, but she shared what she could, and his playing transformed. The villagers noticed the change. "What has happened to you?" the cloth merchant asked one afternoon, after Devraj had played at a wedding. The bride's parents had paid him his usual fee, but their hands had trembled as they counted out the coins, and there had been tears in their eyes. "That music was not of this earth. I felt as though I could see heaven itself when you played." Devraj smiled and deflected the question, but he knew the truth. Chitralekha's teachings had seeped into his fingers, into his soul. When he played now, a little bit of the divine played with him. Amma watched these changes with worried eyes. "You are different," she said one evening, as they sat together in their courtyard. The sunset painted the sky in shades that reminded Devraj painfully of Chitraleka's realm. "You are happier than I have ever seen you, but also sadder, more present, but also more distant. What is happening to you, Beta?" Devraj wanted to tell her. The secret burned in him, demanding to be shared. But how could he explain? How could he tell his practical, loving grandmother that he had fallen in love with a celestial being, that he spent every full moon in the arms of an Apsara, that his heart now belonged to someone who could never truly belong to him? "I am growing, Amma," he said finally. "I am becoming something I was not before. Is that not what life is supposed to be?" She studied him for a long moment, her old eyes seeing more than he wished them to see. "Just remember," she said quietly, "that some growth is healthy and some is not. A tree that grows towards the sun becomes tall and strong. A tree that grows into a fire is consumed. I will remember," he promised. But even as he spoke the words, he knew that he was already burning. As winter turned to spring, and spring warmed towards summer, the bond between Devraj and Chitraleka deepened into something that defied easy description. It was love, yes, but it was also more than love. It was a meeting of souls across an impossible divide, a connection that seemed to transcend the boundaries of divine and mortal. They learned each other's silences as well as each other's words. They developed the ability to communicate without speaking, a glance or a gesture conveying more than hours of conversation. When Devraj played, he played for her. Always, even when she was not there to hear. And when Chitraleka painted in the celestial realm, she found his face appearing unbidden on her canvases, his soul mingling with those she was meant to be recording. This was dangerous, she knew. This was exactly what the old stories warned against. But she could not stop herself, any more than the river could stop flowing toward the sea. One night, as they sat together watching the moon traverse the sky, she told him something she had never told any living being. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" he asked, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Of losing this, of losing you. In heaven, nothing ever ends. We dance forever, we sing forever, we exist forever. But here, with you, I have learned what it means for something to be precious because it is temporary. And that knowledge, that understanding of mortality, terrifies me in ways I cannot express." Devraj squeezed her hand gently. "Then let us not waste a single moment," he said. "Whatever time we have, let us fill it with so much love that even eternity would be jealous." She turned to him, her golden eyes shimmering with something that might have been tears, though celestial beings were not supposed to cry. "You foolish, beautiful mortal," she said, echoing her words from their second meeting. "You have no idea what you have done to me." "Then tell me," he said. "Tell me everything." And she did. She told him that she could feel him even when they were apart, a warmth in her chest that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. She told him that his music had become part of her, woven into her essence so thoroughly that she heard it even in the celestial silence. She told him that she had begun to dream, something Apsaras were not supposed to do, and that every dream was of him. She told him that she was falling from heaven in a way that had nothing to do with curses or punishments, falling by choice, falling toward him, and he told her the same, in his own words, in his own way. He told her that his life had divided into two parts, the grey existence before he met her, and the blazing color of everything since. He told her that he no longer knew where his soul ended and his music began, and that both of them now included her. He told her that he would wait 1,000 lifetimes if necessary, would be reborn again and again, always searching for her, always reaching toward the light she brought to his darkness. It was a declaration and a promise and a prayer, all woven together. And somewhere, in a realm beyond mortal perception, something heard, something that would soon begin to move against them. But that night, in the ancient temple, with the moon painting silver patterns on the water, and their hands intertwined, they knew nothing of what was to come. They knew only each other. And for a few more precious moons, that would have to be enough. In the celestial realm, time moved differently than it did on Earth. What felt like months to Devraj was merely a blink of the eye to beings who had existed since before the world took form. But even in that brief cosmic moment, changes were noticed. It began with whispers. The Apsaras gathered each morning in the pearl-white chambers that served as their preparation rooms, readying themselves for the day's performances in Indra's court. They brushed their impossible hair with combs made of captured moonbeams. They adorned themselves with jewels that contained imprisoned starlight. They practiced the day's dances, their movements so graceful that even the air seemed to sigh with pleasure as they passed. And they gossiped, as beings everywhere gossiped about matters large and small. "Have you noticed Chitralekha lately?" murmured Tilotama, the perfectly crafted one, as she examined her flawless reflection in a mirror of frozen lightning. "She seems distracted." "More than distracted," agreed Menaka, the gentle one, whose voice carried a hint of concern. "She has been absent during the midnight dances. 3 times now she has claimed duties in the painting halls, but I have checked, and the halls have been empty. Perhaps she has found a secret project," suggested a younger Apsara, naive enough to believe in innocent explanations, some soul particularly worthy of her attention. Tilotama's perfect lips curved into a knowing smile. "Or perhaps she has found something else entirely. Someone else. Have you not smelled it on her when she returns from these mysterious absences? The scent of mortal earth, the fragrance of earthly flowers, the whispers spread like ripples in a still pond." They reached Ramba eventually, as all whispers in heaven eventually did. The chief Apsara was ancient beyond counting, beautiful beyond description, and wise in ways that made even the gods treat her with careful respect. She had danced at the dawn of creation. She had seen empires rise and fall on the mortal plane. She knew every scheme the gods had ever devised, and she had executed many of them herself. When the whispers reached her ears, she did not react immediately. She watched instead. She observed. And when she had gathered enough evidence, when she was certain of what was happening, she acted. But she did not act alone. Ramba requested an audience with Indra himself. The king of the gods held court in a hall of impossible dimensions, where the ceiling was the sky itself and the floor was made of clouds so solid they felt like marble. His throne was carved from a single bolt of lightning, frozen at the moment of maximum power, and it crackled softly whenever he moved. Indra himself was resplendent, his 4 arms each holding symbols of his authority: the thunderbolt, the sword, the bow, and the conch. His crown was forged from the light of 1,000 suns. His eyes held the storms of 1,000 worlds. Chief among my dancers, Indra said, his voice like distant thunder. You honor me with your presence. What matter brings you before my throne? Ramba prostrated herself with perfect grace before rising to address him. Great lord, she said, I come with troubling news. One of my Apsaras has been making unauthorized visits to the mortal realm. She has been seen, or rather not seen, departing heaven each month when the mortal moon is full. She returns smelling of earth and flowers and something else. Something else? Indra's eyes narrowed, lightning flickering in their depths. Attachment, my lord. Emotion. The taint of mortal feeling. The hall fell silent. Even the perpetual music that played in Indra's court seemed to quiet, as if the very notes themselves were holding their breath. Which Apsara? Indra asked, though his tone suggested he might already know. Chitralekha, my lord, the painter of souls. Indra rose from his throne, and the clouds beneath his feet roiled with his displeasure. Chitralekha, he repeated, who holds one of the most sacred duties in all the celestial realm, who records the essence of souls for judgment and rebirth. She has entangled herself with a mortal. It appears so, great lord. I have confirmed her absences correspond with the full moons of the mortal world, and there have been changes in her demeanor, changes that speak of emotional involvement beyond what is proper. Indra paced the length of his impassable hall, his multiple arms gesturing in patterns of agitation. This cannot be permitted, he declared. The painter of souls must remain pure, uncorrupted by mortal attachment. If her judgment becomes clouded by emotion, the entire cycle of karma could be compromised. Souls might be painted incorrectly. Rebirths might be assigned to inappropriate lives. The cosmic order itself could unravel. He turned to face Ramba, his expression hard as the diamond mountains at the edge of the world. Bring her before me. Chitralekha was summoned from the painting halls, where she had been working on a portrait of a particularly complex soul, a mortal sage who had accumulated so much good karma that his next rebirth would be almost divine. She set down her brush of crystallized starlight and followed the messenger with a calm she did not feel. She had known this moment would come eventually. She had told herself she was prepared for it. She was not. The walk to Indra's throne room felt endless, each step carrying her closer to a judgment she dreaded. She passed Apsaras she had known for millennia, and they watched her with expressions ranging from sympathy to satisfaction to carefully blank neutrality. The whispers followed her like a train of shadows when she entered the great hall and saw Indra standing before his throne with Ramba at his side. Chitralekha's heart, that organ she was not supposed to have, sank like a stone in deep water. She prostrated herself before the king of the gods and waited. Chitralekha! Indra's voice rolled over her like thunder. You have been accused of unauthorized contact with the mortal realm, of forming an attachment with a human being, of allowing mortal emotions to contaminate your celestial essence. What do you say to these accusations? Chitraleka rose slowly, gathering her courage. I say that they are true, great lord. A murmur of shock rippled through the watching court. Even Ramba's perfect composure flickered for an instant. You admit it? Indra demanded. You do not deny that you have violated the ancient laws, that you have compromised your sacred duty? I have visited the mortal realm, Chitraleka said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. I have met with a mortal man, a musician of extraordinary purity. And I have, she swallowed, forcing herself to continue, I have come to feel things for him that I have never felt before. But I deny that this has compromised my duty. My paintings remain true. My work continues as it always has. Indra's eyes flashed with lightning. You dare to tell me what has and has not been compromised? You who have been sneaking from heaven like a thief in the night. You who have allowed yourself to be seduced by mortal charms. He stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, his power crackling in the air around him. Tell me, Chitraleka, do you feel for this mortal? Do you feel what the humans call love? The word hung in the air between them, dangerous as a drawn blade. Chitraleka thought of Devraj, of his gentle eyes and his graceful hands, of the music he made that reached across the boundary of worlds, of the way he looked at her, not with worship as mortals usually looked at divine beings, but with a tender understanding that saw her for who she truly was. She thought of the choice before her. She could lie, deny her feelings, perhaps escape with a light punishment, or she could speak the truth and face whatever consequences followed. In the end, it was not really a choice at all. Yes, great lord, she said, I love him. The court erupted. Apsaras gasped and whispered. Divine attendants exchanged shocked glances. Even Ramba took an involuntary step backward, as if distancing herself from the blasphemy. Indra raised his hand, and silence fell instantly. You are aware, he said, his voice cold and terrible, of the curse that binds Apsaras who confess love for mortals, the ancient decree laid down at the dawn of creation. Chitraleka nodded. I am aware, great lord. Then you know that by speaking those words you have set that curse in motion. You will be bound to the mortal realm. Your celestial powers will fade. You will age and die as mortals do, feeling every pain, suffering every sorrow. Yes, great lord, I know. Indra studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his storm-filled eyes. But there is another path, he said finally. Another way this can end. The curse has conditions. If the mortal speaks words of possession, if he declares that you belong to him, the curse reverses. You would be torn from his side immediately and permanently. You would return to heaven, but you would be forbidden ever to descend to the mortal realm again. The memory of him would be sealed away, locked beyond your reach. You would continue your duties as if he had never existed. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. This is my offer, Chitraleka. I will give you time to resolve this yourself. Make the mortals speak those words of possession. End this attachment cleanly, and I will forgive your transgression. You will remain as you are, whole and celestial, with only a minor reprimand on your record. And if I refuse, Chitralekha asked, though she already knew the answer, if you refuse, then the curse will take its course. You will become mortal. You will lose everything you are. And the cosmic order you have helped maintain for eons will have to continue without you. Indra returned to his throne, settling onto the frozen lightning with an air of finality. You have until the next full moon to decide. That is my judgment. Now go and consider carefully which path you will choose. Chitralekha bowed and withdrew from the hall, feeling the eyes of the court upon her every step of the way. She walked through the pearl-white corridors of heaven, past the gardens of impossible flowers, past the fountains of liquid light, until she reached her own chambers and could finally be alone. Only then did she allow herself to weep. Not tears of sorrow, for celestial beings were not supposed to know sorrow, not tears of fear, though she was afraid. These were tears of realization, of understanding that the life she had known for countless ages was coming to an end. One way or another, she could trick Devraj into speaking words of possession. She knew him well enough now to know exactly what buttons to push, what insecurities to exploit. She could make him say that she was his, that he owned her heart, that she belonged to him. And then she would be torn away and he would be left alone, and she would continue her existence in heaven, empty and incomplete, but at least still herself. Or she could refuse. She could let the curse take her. She could become mortal, age and die, feel the pain and loss that came with human existence. She would lose her powers, her immortality, her place in the cosmic order. But she would keep him. She would keep their love. The choice seemed impossible. But as she sat alone in her celestial chambers, watching the light of heaven play across surfaces that suddenly seemed strange and distant, Chitralekha realized something that changed everything. The choice was not hers to make alone. Devraj deserved to know. He deserved to understand what was at stake, what options they had, what sacrifices might be required. They had built their love together, two souls reaching across an impossible divide. They should face this crisis together as well. The next full moon was only days away in mortal time. When it rose, she would tell him everything, and together somehow they would find a way through. Meanwhile, in the village of Padmapura, Devraj had no idea that the heavens themselves were turning against him. He practiced his music, taught his students, drank tea with Amma, and counted the days until he could see Chitralekha again. He did not know that this visit would be different from all the others. He did not know that the choice ahead of them would change everything. But somewhere deep in his soul, in the place where his music came from, a premonition stirred, a shadow fell across the light of his anticipation. A sense that something was coming, something momentous, something that would test everything he thought he knew about love and sacrifice. He tried to shake the feeling off. He failed, and the moon continued its inexorable journey toward fullness, carrying them all toward a fate none of them could escape. The summons arrived 3 days before the full moon. Devraj was teaching little Mira when the messenger came. a young man in the elaborate livery of the royal court, riding a horse whose trappings alone were worth more than everything Devraj owned. The messenger dismounted in the village square with the assured grace of someone accustomed to being the center of attention, and asked for the musician Devraj by name. The whole village watched as Devraj was handed a scroll sealed with the royal sigil, 3 lotus flowers arranged in a triangle, the mark of King Chandrasena himself. "You are summoned to court," the messenger announced, loudly enough for all the gathered villagers to hear. "His Majesty King Chandrasena has heard of your remarkable talent. He commands you to perform at the wedding celebration of Princess Padmini, which takes place in 7 days' time. You are to depart immediately, and will be provided lodging in the palace until your service is complete." Devraj unrolled the scroll with trembling hands. The words were there, written in elegant script. A royal command, impossible to refuse. But the full moon was in 3 days. His meeting with Chitralekha, perhaps the most important meeting they had ever had, though he did not yet know why. "Your Highness's messenger," Devraj said carefully, his mind racing. "I am honored beyond measure by this summons, but I have commitments here, students who depend on me. Could I perhaps arrive a day or 2 later than immediately?" The messenger's expression suggested he had never heard a more ridiculous request. "One does not delay when the king commands," he said flatly. "You will come now, or you will explain to his majesty in person why you value village brats more than royal favor." There was no arguing with such logic. Devraj bowed his head in acceptance. The preparations were hurried and chaotic. Devraj rushed home to pack his few necessary belongings, his veena, of course, and a change of clothes, and the small altarpiece of Saraswati that he had carried with him since childhood. Amma watched him with worried eyes, saying little but clearly thinking much. "This is sudden," she finally said as he wrapped his veena in protective cloth. "A royal summons out of nowhere." "I have been playing well lately," Devraj replied, not meeting her eyes. "Word must have spread. Word spreads for a reason, Beta." She caught his arm, forcing him to look at her. "And I cannot help but notice that this summons will take you away during the full moon. The same full moon you have been slipping off to the forest for month after month." Devraj felt his face flush. "You knew? I am old, not blind." Amma's voice was gentle but serious. "I have watched you sneak away. I have seen you return with that light in your eyes, that joy and sorrow mixed together. I have heard you whisper a name in your sleep. Chitralekha, a beautiful name, not a common one. She knows," Devraj thought. "She may not know the details, but she knows enough." "Amma, I cannot explain. Not now, not fully. But there is something waiting for me in that forest, someone who depends on me being there when the moon is full. This summons could not have come at a worse time." His grandmother was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "I do not pretend to understand what is happening to you, Devraj. I do not know what manner of being has captured your heart, though I have my suspicions. But I know this. The king's command cannot be refused. If you do not go, soldiers will come for you. You will be dragged to court in chains, and any hope of returning to your mysterious full moon appointment will vanish." She squeezed his arm. "Go to the palace, play for the king, and trust that whatever awaits you in the forest will understand. If your love is true, it will survive a delayed meeting. If it is not, then better to learn that now. Devraj wanted to argue, wanted to explain that this was different, that the stakes were higher than Amma could possibly know. But the messenger was already calling for him, impatient to begin the journey. He embraced his grandmother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her, jasmine and wood smoke and home. "I will return as soon as I can," he promised. "Watch over my students. Tell them I have not abandoned them. I will tell them their teacher is playing for the king," Amma replied, "and they will burst with pride. Now go. And be careful, Beta. Courts are more dangerous than forests in their own way." The journey to the capital took 2 days, traveling along roads that grew wider and better maintained as they approached the seat of royal power. Devraj had never left Padmapura before, had never seen anything beyond the familiar boundaries of his village and its surrounding forests. The world outside was overwhelming. They passed through villages larger than his, through towns with markets that made Padmapura's weekly fare look like a child's game. They crossed rivers on stone bridges that seemed like impossible feats of construction. They climbed hills from whose peaks Devraj could see the landscape stretching to the horizon, an endless tapestry of green and gold and blue. And finally, on the morning of the 2nd day, they crested a rise, and Devraj saw the capital city spread before him. It was vast. It was magnificent. It was terrifying. Walls of white stone encircled the city, rising to heights that seemed to challenge the sky. Within those walls, buildings of every size and description jostled for space, their rooftops forming a sea of terracotta and gold that stretched as far as Devraj could see. Temples rose above the ordinary structures, their spires reaching towards heaven, and at the center of it all, dominating the skyline like a mountain made of marble and dreams, stood the royal palace. The palace of King Chandrasena was legendary throughout the land, but no legend had prepared Devraj for the reality. It was not merely a building. It was a small city unto itself, a complex of halls and gardens and courtyards that could have swallowed Padmapura 10 times over. Its walls were decorated with carvings so intricate that they seemed to move in the shifting light. Its towers were capped with gold that blazed in the morning sun. Its gardens, visible through ornate gates, were explosions of color and fragrance that made even Chitraleka's descriptions of celestial flowers seem modest. Devraj felt very small, very ordinary, very much out of his depth. The next several days passed in a blur of activity. He was given quarters in the musician's wing of the palace, a small but comfortable room with a window overlooking one of the lesser gardens. He was fed rich food, far more elaborate than anything he had ever tasted, and clothed in fine garments provided by the royal household. He was introduced to other musicians who had been summoned for the wedding, virtuosos from across the kingdom, who regarded the village player with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. Through it all, Devraj thought of Chitraleka. The full moon came and went while he was trapped in the palace, attending rehearsals and receiving instructions about proper court etiquette. He spent that night alone in his room, playing softly on his veena, hoping against hope that somehow the music might reach her, might let her know that he had not abandoned her by choice. He had no way of knowing whether she heard. He had no way of knowing what was happening in the celestial realm, what judgment had been passed, what crisis was unfolding. All he could do was play and hope and count the days until he could return home. The wedding itself was a spectacle beyond anything Devraj had imagined. Princess Padmini was a beauty, tall and graceful, with eyes like dark pools and a smile that could melt the heart of the stoniest courtier. Her groom was Prince Vikram of a neighboring kingdom, a handsome young man who looked at his bride with undisguised adoration. The ceremony combined their two families, two kingdoms, in a union that would bring peace and prosperity to all their subjects. Devraj played as he had never played before. He drew upon everything Chitralekha had taught him, every celestial melody she had shared, every technique she had demonstrated. He played the joy of love fulfilled, the wonder of two souls finding each other, the eternal hope that romance represented. He played his longing for her, transformed into music that spoke of reunion rather than separation. He played the depth of his feelings, channeled into notes that could be heard but not questioned. The court fell silent as he played. Conversation ceased. Dancers paused in mid-motion. Even the king himself, magnificent on his golden throne, leaned forward to listen with something approaching awe. When the final notes faded into silence, there was a moment of perfect stillness. Then the applause began. It was not the polite approval that had greeted the other musicians. It was something rawer, more genuine, a response torn from hearts that had been unexpectedly moved. The princess was weeping with joy. The prince was gripping her hand with renewed fervor. Throughout the great hall, hardened courtiers were wiping their eyes and pretending they were not. "Extraordinary," King Chandrasena declared, rising from his throne to approach the small stage where Devraj sat. "I have heard music in every corner of my kingdom and beyond. I have employed the finest musicians gold can command, but never have I heard anything like what you just played. What manner of sorcery do you practice, musician? What magic lives in your strings? It is not sorcery, your majesty," Devraj replied, bowing low. "It is only love, given voice through my humble instrument." "Love," the king repeated, tasting the word. Yes, I believe you." That was the sound of love, pure and undiluted. "Tell me, musician, what woman has inspired such devotion? What fortunate creature holds your heart?" Before Devraj could answer, before he could deflect or dissemble, another voice spoke from the crowd. "Yes, do tell us." The voice belonged to a young woman who stepped forward from among the royal spectators. She was beautiful, though it was a sharp beauty, all angles and calculation. Her sari was of the finest silk, her jewels spoke of wealth beyond measure, and her eyes, as they fixed on Devraj, held an interest that made him profoundly uncomfortable. "Princess Malini," someone whispered nearby, "the bride's younger sister. I would very much like to know," Princess Malini continued, approaching the stage with the confident grace of one who had never been denied anything. "What manner of love could produce such exquisite music? Is she noble, common? Does she even exist? Or are you simply gifted at imagining passion you have never felt? Devraj felt trapped. The entire court was watching, waiting for his answer. The king's eyes were upon him. The princess stood close enough that he could smell her perfume, heavy and cloying. "She exists, Your Highness," he said carefully, "but she is far away, and I do not expect you would know her." Far away. Princess Melini smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "And yet you play of love, as though she were standing beside you, as though you could reach out and touch her. That is either remarkable imagination or remarkable devotion. I wonder which." She held his gaze for a long moment, something calculating moving behind her beautiful eyes. Then she turned and walked away, rejoining the other nobles as though the conversation had never happened. But Devraj knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that it was not over. She was interested in him now, and something told him that Princess Melini's interest was not a blessing. The days that followed confirmed his fears. Princess Melini found reasons to be wherever Devraj was. She requested private performances, which he could not refuse. She asked endless questions about his music, his life, his mysterious love. She offered him positions at court, wealth beyond imagining, a life of luxury and privilege such as he had never dreamed. And when he politely, carefully, repeatedly declined, she grew frustrated, and then suspicious. "You play music that could move the gods themselves," she said one evening, cornering him in a garden where he had sought a moment's peace. "You could have everything this world offers, and yet you wish to return to your little village, to your humble life, to a woman you will not even name. Why? What could possibly be waiting for you there that surpasses what I offer here?" "Your Highness is most generous," Devraj said, keeping his voice steady despite his pounding heart. "But my heart is not mine to give. It belongs to another, fully and completely. I cannot offer what I do not possess." Princess Melini's eyes narrowed. "We shall see about that," she said quietly. "We shall see." That night, unable to sleep, Devraj slipped out of his quarters and walked through the palace gardens. The moon was waxing toward full again, and in a few more days he would be free to return home. A few more days, and he could find Chitralekha, could explain his absence, could discover what had happened while he was trapped in this golden cage. He found a secluded bench near a fountain and sat with his veena, playing softly to the uncaring stars. He played his longing, his worry, his desperate hope that she would forgive him for missing their appointment. He did not notice the shadow that watched from behind a hedge of flowering jasmine. He did not see Princess Melini's eyes widen as, for just a moment, the air around him seemed to shimmer, and a voice that was not quite of this world seemed to answer his music with a melody of its own. He did not know that his secret was no longer secret, and he did not know that the princess, shocked and fascinated and furious all at once, had already begun to plan what she would do with this impossible information. The full moon was 5 days away. Everything was about to change. Princess Melini did not sleep that night. She paced her lavish chambers like a caged tiger, her mind churning with what she had witnessed in the garden. The shimmer in the air, the otherworldly voice that had seemed to answer Devraj's music. The look of desperate longing on his face, directed not at any mortal woman, but at something beyond, something impossible. She had been raised on stories of the gods and their servants. She knew the tales of Apsaras, those celestial dancers who sometimes descended to the mortal realm. She knew the legends of mortals who had loved divine beings, always tragically, always at terrible cost. She had dismissed such stories as fanciful tales meant to entertain children and warn young women against reaching above their station. Now, she was not so certain. By dawn, the princess had made her decision. If Devraj would not come to her willingly, if his heart truly belonged to some celestial being, then she would use that knowledge as leverage. She would force his hand one way or another. She summoned her most trusted servant, a woman named Lakshmi, who had served her since childhood, and whose loyalty was absolute. "I need you to watch the musician," Malini instructed, "every moment of every day. When he leaves for his village after the wedding celebrations conclude, you will follow him. You will report to me everything he does, everywhere he goes, everyone he meets, especially if he meets anyone unusual, anyone who might not be entirely human." Lakshmi's eyes widened, but she did not question her mistress. She never did. The wedding celebrations continued for 3 more days, each one filled with feasting and dancing and enough entertainment to occupy 12 lifetimes. Devraj performed each night, his music no less magnificent for the turmoil in his heart. If anything, his playing grew more intense, more emotionally raw as the days counted down toward the full moon. Finally, mercifully, it was over. King Chandrasena summoned Devraj to his throne room one final time, pressing a heavy purse of gold into his hands. "You have honored my daughter's wedding with your gift," the king declared. "This payment is a poor reflection of your worth, but take it with my gratitude, and know that you will always be welcome in my court, should you choose to return." Devraj bowed deeply, clutching the purse with hands that trembled with eagerness to be gone. "Your Majesty is too generous. I am forever grateful for this opportunity, but my village awaits, and I have been away too long, of course. The king waved a benevolent hand. "Go with my blessing. And musician," he added as Devraj turned to leave, "whatever love inspired that music of yours, hold on to it. Such passion is rare in this world. Do not let it slip away." Devraj's throat tightened. "I will not, Your Majesty. I swear it." He departed the palace within the hour, walking rather than waiting for a horse to be arranged. The full moon was that very night, and he had no time to waste. If he walked quickly, if he did not stop to rest, he might reach the temple just as the moon was rising. He did not notice the figure that followed at a careful distance, cloaked and hooded despite the warm weather. The journey that had taken 2 days by horse took nearly 3 on foot, even at Devraj's desperate pace. By the time he reached the familiar forest surrounding Padmapura, he was exhausted beyond measure. His feet were blistered, his legs screamed with every step, and his vision swam with fatigue. But the moon was rising, fat and silver and full, and nothing could have stopped him from reaching the temple. He did not go home first. He did not stop to see Amma or reassure his students. He plunged directly into the forest, following the path he now knew by heart, climbing through the darkness towards the sacred clearing. The temple was waiting for him, ancient and beautiful and glowing with moonlight, and standing beside the pool, her form already solid with waiting, was Chitralekha. Devraj stumbled into the clearing and fell to his knees, too exhausted to stand, too overwhelmed to speak. Chitralekha flew to his side, her celestial hands cool and soothing against his fevered skin. "You came," she breathed. "I thought perhaps you had chosen differently. I thought perhaps you had decided that a mortal life, free of me and my complications, would be easier." "Never," Devraj gasped. "I was trapped at the palace. The king commanded my presence. I could not refuse, could not escape. I played every night thinking of you. I counted every moment until I could return." She helped him to sit, conjuring water from somewhere beyond mortal perception and pressing it to his lips. He drank gratefully, feeling strength slowly return to his depleted body. "I have much to tell you," Chitralekha said when he had recovered enough to focus. "Things have happened in heaven, things that change everything," and she told him all of it. The whispers among the Apsaras, Ramba's betrayal, the audience with Indra, the curse and its conditions, the choice that lay before them. Devraj listened in growing horror. "So if I speak of possessing you, of you being mine, you will be taken from me forever?" Chitralekha nodded, her golden eyes filled with sorrow. "I would be returned to heaven, my memory of you sealed away. I would continue my existence as though you had never been. And if you remain with me, you will become mortal. You will lose your powers, your immortality, your place in the cosmic order." "Yes." She reached out and took his hands in hers. "But I would have you. We would have each other for however many years a mortal life contains." Devraj's mind reeled. He thought of Ama's warnings about reaching for stars and finding only cold distance. He thought of Guru Vishwamitra's tale of Pururavas, who had gained eternity, but only after years of madness and grief. He thought of what it would mean for a celestial being to give up everything for a village musician who had nothing to offer but love. "I cannot ask you to make that sacrifice," he said finally. "It is too much. You are eternal, Chitralekha. You have existed since before my ancestors' ancestors were born. You will exist long after my great-grandchildren are dust. How can I ask you to give up infinity for a few decades?" "You are not asking," she replied. "I am choosing. There is a difference, but your work, the souls you paint, the cosmic order you help maintain, how can I be worth more than all of that?" Chitralekha was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "Let me tell you something I have never told anyone," she said. "I have painted souls for eons, millions of them, perhaps billions, each one unique, each one precious, each one a testament to the complexity and beauty of existence. But in all that time, in all those portraits, I have never painted a soul like yours." She touched his face gently, her celestial fingers tracing the lines of his features. "Your soul is pure, Devraj, not perfect, but pure. It is filled with love and longing and a devotion to beauty that transcends anything I have encountered in my endless existence. When I paint you, When I try to capture your essence, I find myself adding colors that do not exist in any celestial palette. I find myself creating something new, something that has never been seen in all the realms of gods and men. Her eyes glistened with tears that should not have been possible. If I return to heaven without you, I will continue my work. I will paint souls for another eon, and another after that. But something in me will be missing. The part of me that you awakened, the part that learned to feel mortal emotions, to love with a mortal heart. That part will be sealed away with my memory of you, and I will be less than I was, less than I could be. But if you become mortal, if I become mortal, I will finally understand what I have been painting all these eons. I will feel what those souls feel. I will live and love and struggle and eventually die. And in doing so, I will complete myself. I will become whole in a way that immortality never allowed. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his. You are not asking me to sacrifice, Devraj. You are offering me a gift, the gift of mortality, the gift of meaning, the gift of a love that is precious precisely because it will end. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, existing together in the space between words. Then a sound shattered the silence. Footsteps, rustling in the undergrowth, and a voice, sharp and triumphant, cutting through the sacred stillness. So it is true. Princess Malini stepped into the clearing, her face flushed with exertion and twisted with complex emotions. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, crouched her servant Lakshmi. The princess stared at Chitralekha with a mixture of awe and horror. A celestial being, an actual Apsara. Here, in a ruined temple, meeting with a village musician. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I knew there was something unusual about your music, Devraj. I knew no mortal could play with such divine power, but I never imagined this. Your Highness, Devraj said, rising to his feet and positioning himself between the princess and Chitralekha. This is not what it appears. Do not lie to me. Malini's eyes flashed with anger. I saw what I saw in the palace garden. I have followed you here and witnessed this reunion with my own eyes. I know what she is, even if I do not fully understand it. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on Chitralekha now. You are beautiful, she said, and her voice carried a note of wonder despite her anger. More beautiful than any mortal woman could ever be. I see now why he refused me. How could any human compare to you, Your Highness? Chitralekha spoke for the first time, her voice gentle despite the threat. You do not understand what you have stumbled into. There are forces at work here beyond mortal comprehension. Please, for your own sake, leave this place and forget what you have seen. Forget? Malini's laugh was bitter. I am a princess of the realm. I do not forget. I do not retreat. And I certainly do not allow myself to be cast aside for anyone, mortal or divine. She turned to Devraj, her expression hardening. You will return to the palace with me. You will become court musician, as I have wished. You will forget this impossible creature and content yourself with mortal pleasures, or else... Or else what? Devraj asked quietly. Or else I will tell everyone what I have seen. I will describe this creature to the priests, to the scholars, to anyone who will listen. I will lead them here to this temple. I will expose this secret to the world. Chitraleka stepped forward, and something in her bearing changed. For a moment, she was not a gentle soul caught between worlds. She was something ancient and powerful, a being who had danced at the dawn of creation and had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 kingdoms. "You would not survive such an exposure," she said, and her voice resonated with celestial authority. "The gods do not take kindly to mortals who interfere in divine affairs. You would draw their attention, and that attention would destroy you." Malini paled but stood her ground. "You are threatening me. I am warning you. There is a difference." The clearing fell silent, tension crackling like lightning between the three figures. Lakshmi, the servant, had shrunk back against a tree, clearly wishing she were anywhere else. Then, slowly, something changed in Malini's face. The anger remained, but it was joined by something else, something that looked almost like grief. "I did not come here to threaten," she said finally, her voice smaller than before. "I came because I wanted to understand. I wanted to know what you had, that I did not. What made you worthy of his love when I, with all my wealth and power and beauty, was not enough." She looked at Chitraleka with eyes that glistened. "And now I see. You are not just beautiful. You are divine. You are everything that a mortal woman can never be. How can I compete with that? How can anyone?" "You do not need to compete," Chitraleka said, and her voice was gentle again, filled with compassion. "Love is not a contest." Devraj's heart turned toward me not because I am divine, but because our souls recognized each other. "There is someone whose soul will recognize yours, princess. Someone who will love you not despite your fire and passion, but because of them. But that someone is not here, and demanding what cannot be given will only bring you pain." Malini stood very still. A tear traced down her cheek, quickly wiped away. "I have never been refused," she whispered. "I have never wanted something I could not have. I do not know how to bear it. You learn," Devraj said softly. "You grieve, and then you grow. It is what mortals do. It is what makes us strong." The princess looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Chitraleka. Then finally she looked away at the moonlit forest, at the ancient temple, at the impossible beauty of the night. "I will not tell anyone," she said at last. "I will return to the palace and say nothing of what I have seen. Your secret is safe." She turned to leave, then paused. "But, musician," she added over her shoulder, "play for me one more time before you disappear into your impossible love story. Play something that will help me understand what I am feeling. Play something that will help me let go." Devraj looked at Chitraleka, who nodded gently. He picked up his veena and played. He played loss and acceptance. He played the pain of wanting and the peace of releasing. He played the strange beauty of loving something enough to let it be free. And when the last notes faded, Princess Malini was gone, disappeared into the forest with her silent servant, leaving Devraj and Chitraleka alone once more beneath the watching moon. "That was kindly done," Chitraleka said. "She deserved kindness," Devraj replied. "We all do." They looked at each other, and the weight of the choice before them settled over the clearing like a cloak. The moon had reached its zenith. The night was half spent, and everything still remained to be decided. The silence that followed Princess Malini's departure was profound, filled with the weight of unspoken words and unmade choices. Devraj and Chitraleka stood facing each other in the moonlit clearing, the ancient temple a witness to their impossible situation. "The moon will not wait forever," Chitraleka said softly. "When it sets, Indra will expect an answer. If I have not returned to heaven by dawn, the curse will begin to take effect. I will start to become mortal. And if you return," Devraj said, the words like ash in his mouth, "you will be beyond my reach forever, your memory of me sealed away, our love erased as though it never existed." Yes, the word hung between them, simple and devastating. Devraj sank onto the stone rim of the sacred pool, his head in his hands. For all his talk of love being worth any price, now that the price was actually being demanded, he found himself paralyzed with doubt. "I have been thinking," he said slowly, "about what you told me, about your work, about the souls you paint, about what happens if you are not there to guide them." Chitraleka sat beside him, her celestial form somehow seeming more fragile than he had ever seen it. "Another painter would take my place," she said. "The work would continue. The cosmic order is not so dependent on any single being that it would collapse without me. But would it be the same? Would those souls receive the same care, the same attention, the same understanding that you bring to your portraits?" She was quiet for a long moment. "No," she admitted finally. "Each painter sees differently. Each one brings their own perspective to the work. Some souls might be painted less accurately. Some rebirths might be less perfectly matched. But the difference would be small in the grand scheme of things. The universe would survive." Devraj looked at her, at this impossible being who had descended from heaven to love him, who was willing to give up eternity for a few mortal decades at his side. "And what about us?" he asked. "If you become mortal, if we have our years together, what happens when those years end? When we die, what becomes of our souls?" A strange light entered Chitraleka's golden eyes. "That," she said, "is something I've been thinking about as well. You see, I have painted countless souls over the eons. I know what awaits the worthy. I know the paths that lead to higher rebirths, to eventual liberation from the cycle entirely. And I know something else." She took his hands in hers, her grip warm and certain. "I know that souls who have loved truly, who have forged connections across impossible divides, do not lose each other. They find each other again, lifetime after lifetime. The details change, the circumstances change, but the essential bond remains. It is one of the beautiful truths I have witnessed in my work. So if we die," Devraj said slowly, "understanding dawning, we would be reborn. And we would find each other again. Yes, not immediately, perhaps. Not easily. There might be lifetimes of searching, of near misses, of connections that almost form but do not quite complete. But eventually, inevitably, our souls would recognize each other. We would fall in love again. We would have another chance." Her smile was radiant despite the tears that traced down her celestial cheeks. "That is the gift of mortal love, Devraj. It is not eternal in the way that celestial existence is eternal, but it is eternal in a different way. It echoes through lifetimes. It shapes the very fabric of karma. It becomes part of the universe itself, woven into the tapestry of creation." Devraj felt something shift inside him. The doubt that had been paralyzing him began to dissolve, replaced by something that felt very much like peace. "Then we should not be afraid," he said. "Whatever comes, whatever price we pay, we will find each other again." Yes, Chitraleka's voice was steady now. "Certain. We will always find each other again." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the moon trace its path across the sky. The night was beautiful, cool and clear, filled with the sounds of the living forest and the ancient peace of the temple. "There is something I want to give you," Chitraleka said, eventually. She raised her hands and light began to gather between her palms. It swirled and condensed, taking shape, becoming solid. When she lowered her hands, she held a single lotus flower, glowing with an inner light that had nothing to do with the moon. "This is a celestial lotus," she explained, placing it gently in Devraj's hands. "It will never wilt, never fade. As long as it glows, you will know that I am thinking of you, wherever I am, whatever form I take. And when it blooms fully, when all its petals open wide, it means that my soul is near. It means that we are about to find each other again." Devraj cradled the flower as though it were the most precious thing in the world, because it was. "And I have something for you," he said. He picked up his veena, settling it in his lap with the ease of long practice. "I have been working on this for months. A raga that captures everything we are to each other, every moment we have shared, every feeling we have felt, woven into music that will last forever." He began to play. The melody started softly, gently, like the first stirrings of dawn. It spoke of a young musician by a river, reaching towards something he could not name. It spoke of moonlit nights and impossible meetings of a celestial being descending from heaven, drawn by the purity of mortal art. The music grew, deepened, became something richer and more complex. It sang of love discovered and nurtured, of secrets shared and bonds forged. It wept with the pain of separation and soared with the joy of reunion. It trembled with fear and steadied with courage, and finally it transformed into something transcendent. Not mortal music, not celestial music, but something new. A bridge between worlds made of sound and soul and the inexhaustible power of love. Chitraleka listened with her eyes closed, tears streaming freely down her face, and as the music washed over her, she began to dance. She danced as she had never danced before, not in Indra's court, not in the celestial gardens, not in any of the countless performances she had given over the eons of her existence. This was not performance. This was expression. This was her soul made visible, moving in perfect harmony with his soul made audible. They created together, musician and dancer, mortal and divine, weaving something beautiful out of the impossible materials of their love. The dance continued as the moon descended toward the horizon. The music flowed without pause or rest, and slowly, gradually, something began to change. Chitraleka's form began to flicker. The celestial light that had always surrounded her started to dim. Her movements, while still graceful, became heavier, more grounded, more real. She was becoming mortal. Devraj faltered in his playing. "Chitraleka!" he gasped, seeing the transformation taking place. "The curse! Do not stop!" she commanded, her voice already sounding different, more human. "Do not stop playing. Let me dance my way into mortality. Let me enter this new existence through beauty rather than loss." He obeyed, pouring everything he had into the music, playing through his tears, playing through his fear, playing through the overwhelming love that threatened to crack his heart in two. The eastern sky began to lighten. The first hints of dawn appeared beyond the trees, and as the sun's rays touched the clearing, Chitraleka's transformation completed. She stumbled, her feet touching the ground fully for the first time, no longer hovering on celestial grace. She gasped, feeling sensations she had never felt before. The cool air on her skin, the solid earth beneath her, the beating of a heart that had not existed moments before. Devraj dropped his veena and caught her as she swayed, holding her against him with desperate tenderness. "How do you feel?" he asked, searching her face for signs of pain or regret. She looked up at him, and her eyes, while still beautiful, were no longer golden. They were brown now, warm and human and filled with wonder. "I feel," she said, and laughed, a sound of pure joy. "I feel everything. The air, the ground, my heart beating. I feel hungry and tired and overwhelmed and happy and scared and alive. So wonderfully, terribly alive." She touched her face, her arms, her hair, marveling at the solidity of it all. "Is this what it is like," she asked, "to be mortal, to feel everything so intensely?" "This is what it is like," Devraj confirmed. "Every moment is precious because every moment is fleeting. Every joy is sweeter because we know it will not last. Every love is deeper because we know we will not have it forever." He held her tighter, "Except that we will, in a different way, through lifetime after lifetime, we will find each other again." Chitraleka looked around the clearing, at the ancient temple that had witnessed their impossible love story, at the pool where she had first appeared to him, at the sky where heaven still existed, now forever beyond her reach. "I do not regret it," she said firmly. "Not for an instant. This," she placed her hand over her heart, "this feeling, this life, this love, it is worth everything I have given up, everything and more." The sun rose fully, flooding the clearing with golden light. Birds began to sing in the trees. The ordinary sounds of the waking world surrounded them. "Come," Devraj said, taking her hand. "Let me take you home. Amma will want to meet the woman who has captured her grandson's heart." "Will she accept me?" Chitraleka asked, suddenly uncertain. "A stranger who appears from nowhere, with no family, no history, no explanation that would make sense to mortal ears." Devraj smiled. "She will accept you because I love you, and because she has been praying for me to find someone since I was old enough to notice that girls existed. She may have questions, but she has always been wise enough to accept what she cannot understand." They walked out of the clearing together, leaving the ancient temple to its silence and its memories. Behind them, the sacred pool still glowed faintly with residual celestial light. The statue of Saraswati seemed to smile. The path through the forest seemed different in daylight, less mysterious, more welcoming. Just an ordinary woods, filled with ordinary trees, inhabited by ordinary creatures going about their ordinary lives, and yet, to Devraj, it had never been more beautiful. They emerged from the trees to find Padmapur awaking to a new day. The temple bells were ringing as they always did. The roosters were crowing as they always did. The smell of cooking fires and morning tea drifted on the breeze. "It is just as you described it," Chitraleka said softly. "The village, the river, the lotus pool. I have seen it so many times through your words, but seeing it with mortal eyes, feeling it with mortal senses, it is different. More real, more precious." They walked through the village together, drawing curious glances from early rising neighbors. A stranger on Devraj's arm, beautiful and mysterious, wearing clothes that seemed to glow with an inner light. The gossip would be fierce by midday, Devraj knew, but he did not care. Amma was waiting for them in the courtyard, as though she had known they were coming. Perhaps she had. Perhaps the wisdom of grandmothers extended to sensing when the world had changed. She looked at Chitraleka for a long moment, her old eyes taking in every detail. Then she looked at Devraj, seeing the peace and joy in his face. "So," she said finally, "you have brought her home at last. The one you have been meeting in the forest, the one whose name you whisper in your sleep." "Yes, Amma, this is Chitraleka. She is—" He paused, searching for words that could bridge the impossible gap between truth and explanation. "She is the woman I love, the woman I will spend my life with." Amma nodded slowly. "And where does she come from, this woman with no family name and clothes that seem woven from moonlight?" Chitraleka stepped forward, bowing respectfully. "Grandmother," she said, using the familiar term deliberately, "I come from very far away, a place I can never return to. I have given up everything to be with your grandson. I have no family now, no home, no history that would make sense if I tried to explain it. I have only love and a willingness to learn how to be part of this world, this village, this family." Amma studied her for another long moment. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her weathered face. "Love and willingness are enough," she said. "Come inside, child. I will make tea, and you will tell me everything you can. And what you cannot tell me," she added with a knowing look, "I will simply accept as mystery." The years that followed were the happiest of Devraj's life. Chitraleka adapted to mortal existence with remarkable grace. She learned to cook and clean and do all the ordinary tasks that celestial beings never needed to master. She learned to sleep and dream and wake refreshed. She learned to feel hunger and satisfaction, cold and warmth, fatigue and energy. She learned to age. This was perhaps the strangest part of her new existence. In heaven, she had been eternally the same, unchanging through eons. Now, year by year, she changed. Lines appeared around her eyes. Grey touched her hair. Her movements, while still graceful, became slower, more deliberate. She found this not frightening, but fascinating. Each change was a badge of honor, a proof that she was truly living, truly part of the mortal world she had chosen. Devraj continued to teach and perform, his music no less beautiful for the happiness that now filled his life. If anything, it was more beautiful, enriched by the contentment of a heart that had found its home. Students came from ever greater distances to learn from him. His reputation spread throughout the kingdom. The celestial lotus that Chitraleka had given him sat on a shelf in their home, glowing softly, never wilting. Sometimes its light pulsed brighter, and they would smile at each other, knowing that some part of her celestial nature still remembered, still reached toward him across the boundary she had crossed. They had children, a son first, who inherited his father's musical gift and his mother's inexplicable grace, then a daughter, who had Chitraleka's eyes and Devraj's gentle heart. The children grew and learned, and eventually had children of their own, filling the small house with laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of family. Amma lived long enough to see her great-grandchildren, finally passing peacefully in her sleep one winter night, a smile on her face, and her hands still warm from holding the newest baby. They mourned her, but they also celebrated her, knowing that she had lived a full and meaningful life. And through it all, Devraj and Chitraleka loved each other with a love that only deepened with time. "Do you ever regret it?" Devraj asked one evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of mango and rose. They were old now, white-haired and weathered by decades of living. Giving up eternity for this? Chitraleka took his hand, her grip still warm and certain despite the years. "I have told you before," she said. "I found more in these few decades than I found in eons of celestial existence. I have felt joy and sorrow, triumph and loss, love and grief. I have watched children grow and held grandchildren in my arms. I have been part of something larger than myself." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Eternity is vast," she continued, "but it is also empty. An endless expanse of existence without meaning or change. This," she gestured at the world around them, the village, the river, the family inside their home. "This is small, but it is full. Every moment matters, because every moment passes. Every love is precious, because every love will end." She looked up at him, and despite the wrinkles and the gray hair and all the marks of age, he saw the same soul he had fallen in love with all those years ago in a moonlit temple. "I would choose this again," she said, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. In every lifetime I would find you and choose you and love you until the end. "And I would choose you," Devraj replied, "in every lifetime, in every form, until the stars themselves grow old and fade." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the day end and the night begin. The full moon rose as it always did, silver and serene. And for a moment, just a moment, Devraj thought he heard celestial music drifting on the breeze, a melody from the realm his wife had left behind. Perhaps the gods were watching. Perhaps they understood at last. Love, true love, was not a violation of the cosmic order. It was the cosmic order, expressing itself through the hearts of those brave enough to embrace it. Many years later, on another full moon night, Devraj and Chitraleka passed from the world together, peacefully, holding hands as they had held hands so many times before. Their children and grandchildren mourned them, but also celebrated them, telling stories of their love that would echo through generations, and somewhere in the vast wheel of existence, two souls began their journey toward each other once more. They would find new forms, new circumstances, new challenges to overcome, but they would find each other. They always did. The celestial lotus on its shelf in the family home, bloomed fully one morning, all its petals opening wide, filling the room with light that had no earthly source. Their great-granddaughter, a young woman with musical talent and an inexplicable grace, touched the glowing flower and felt something stir in her soul, a memory that was not quite a memory, a love that spanned lifetimes. She picked up the ancient veena that had been passed down through generations and began to play. And somewhere, in a distant city, a young artist looked up from his canvas, hearing music that no one else could hear, feeling a pull towards something he could not name. The dance continued, the love endured, and the story began again. And that, my dear friends, is where we will end tonight's tale. I hope it has warmed your heart and perhaps brought a tear to your eye, for the best stories do both. Remember, wherever you are, whoever you love, that connection is precious precisely because it is fragile. Hold it gently, cherish it deeply, and trust that true love never really ends. It simply transforms and continues and finds its way home. Until next time, be safe and sweet dreams.